Ashok showed me the houses he and his widows of the village had erected with the compensation pay they had been awarded by the government. They were miniature castles, tall and square, with no windows except for thin arrow slits on the third story. Unwittingly, they were almost exact miniature copies of the Peel Towers erected across the Scottish borders in the 16th century, where the central authority had completely broken down. There could be no better illustration of Bihar's regression into the Dark Ages. Ashok rubbed the huge scar of his neck and said, "Now the Harijans refuse to work on our fields and there are not enough Bhumihar men left to till them ourselves. When the Harijans pass on the road, they pass it, comments at us, 'We have not finished with you yet,' or 'You will meet the same fate as your brothers.' These people are enjoying what has happened. They have grown fat and behave like they are Brahmins. But us Bhumihars, every night after sunset, we are frightened. Every night I have nightmares. They may come again. What is to stop them? The police and the Bihari government of Lalu Prasad Yadav are on their side. This massacre was his handiwork. In what sense? Lalu is from low caste, said Ashok. He is always encouraging the Nicha to raise up against us. When Lalu came here after the massacre, we threw stones at him. Every day we pray for his downfall. But don't your new houses give you some protection? I asked. Our houses are strong, replied Ashok, but we are vulnerable. We cannot stay in our houses all day. We have to move around. Cow herds were now leading the buffalo back to the village for milking. Around where we are standing, women were lighting dung fires and beginning to cook supper. The afternoon was drawing in. I thought of the warnings we had received to be back in Patna and of the roads by the fall of darkness. The government will not protect us. Ashoka, as we walked back to the car, so we were left at the mercy of God. This is the Kali Yuga, the epoch of disintegration. The lower castes are rising up. Everything is falling apart. After living in India for 5 years, I finally left Delhi in 1994. I dismantled my flat and set off to write a book in the Middle East. Returning to the subcontinent 2.5 years later, I found that a quiet social revolution had taken place in my absence, with the lower caste politicians seizing power in state after state across India. This process seemed to have started in Bihar. In the person of Lalu Prasad Yadav, the man of villagers of Bara had blamed for the massacre. Lalu in many ways seemed to personify much that was happening in India, and I decided to return to Bihar to try and meet him. Although a similar revolution was taking place at the same time in Uttar Pradesh. When he first came to power in 1991, Lalu was still a relatively unlikely figure in the North Indian politics. The Indian establishment was then still confirmedly dominated by higher caste. Nehru, his daughters, Mrs. Gandhi, and his son Rajiv were all Brahmins. As Rajiv's successor as the head of Congress Party and Prime Minister Narasimha Rao, Brahmins had ruled India 44 of 50 years of independence. Kshatriyas, the second running in the caste pyramid, ruled for 2 more years in the persons of V.P. Singh 1989 to 1990 and Chandrasekhar 1990 to 91. Lower or intermediate caste prime ministers had been in power for fewer than 4 years of the half century since the British left India. Lalu was the son of a low caste village herd. Lalu was the son of the low-caste village cowherd. In the Bihar of 1960s and 70s, it was against all the odds that a man like him would manage to get educated and attain even a foothold in politics. Despite the fact that the lower castes, the untouchables and tribesmen together formed a full 73% of population of Bihar. In the 1962 Bihar Legislative Assembly, over 60% of MLAs were from the top two castes, while less than 7% were from the low caste background. But from the early 1980s onwards, the lower caste had been on rise, while the upper caste were in rapid retreat. In 1984 general election, Bihar returned 25 upper caste MPs to the national parliament, including 7 Brahmins. By 1989, this number had sunk to 18, with the Brahmins still retaining the quota of 7. In 1991, the year Lalu came to power, replacing a Kshatriya chief minister, the number of upper caste MPs had shrunk to 10, with only 1 Brahmin among them. From 1989 to 1991, the Congress party was unable to field even 1 Brahmin who could win a parliamentary seat in Bihar. In the Bihar Legislative Assembly, there has been an equally dramatic shift. Only 10.2% of Bihar MLAs are from the top 2 castes, while 52.5% are from low caste backgrounds. Lalu's political views were formed by his childhood experience of being kicked around by higher caste of his village. From the beginning of his career, he spoke out bitterly against Brahmins and Hindu revival that in many areas was bringing about a new hardening in the caste system. Our fight is against the wearers of the sacred thread, that's the Brahmins, he told his audiences. For centuries, the priests have made fortune by fooling the villagers. Now I tell them they should learn to milk cattle and graze them, otherwise they will starve. On other occasion, he publicly voiced his disbelief in the Hindu gods. Ram should punish these murderous fundamentalists, if he exists, that is. But he is nowhere. If he was there, so many poor people would not have died, there would not have been such poverty, such fights. In a country as obsessed with religion as India, such brazen anti-Brahminical atheism was a completely new message, at least in the north. But too many people surprised it worked. In the 1991 General Assembly, Lalu was supported by the combined votes of the poor, the casteless and the oppressed Muslim community was swept into power with an unprecedented majority. Since then, in the 1996 election, Lalu's vote fell back slightly, but he managed to retain his hold on power despite increasingly clear evidence that his government and indeed his own family were deeply corrupt and were presiding over the looting of the state treasury. One act had brought up a particular disrepute: the alleged embezzlement of vast sums of agricultural subsidies, referred to in the Indian papers as the multi-crore fodder scam. Yet, not withholding the fall in his share of vote, Lalu had gained greatly increased national power as he now formed the part of the ruling coalition government. For what had happened in Bihar in 1991 happened elsewhere in northeastern India in 1996 election, with the rural government, the rural lower castes seizing control of state governments across the country, and candidates from upper caste elite losing their seats in mass. H.D. Devegowda, a middle caste farmer from Karnataka, was sworn in as a prime minister to replace the Brahman Narasimha Rao. Propped by a variety of regional parties, many of whom represented the lower castes, where Bihar had led, the rest of the country had followed. There are two theories about the effects of this social revolution. Pessimists point out that while the anglicized Brahmin elite produced leaders of the caliber of Jawaharlal Nehru and Indira Gandhi, the rise of rural lower caste has resulted in the emergence of a cadre of semi-literate village thugs. Men like Lalu and his counterpart in Uttar Pradesh, Mulayam Singh Yadav, a small-time wrestler and alleged mafia don, who has now risen to become India's defense minister. Many such rustics can barely write their names and have certainly no hope of mastering the finer points of international diplomacy and economics. On the other hand, the last decade of Brahmin rule brought to power a man like Rajiv Gandhi, who, for all of his polish, was barely able to speak Hindi and certainly had no grasp of the realities of life for 80% of Indians who lived in villages. 10 years ago, every second person in Delhi drinks parties seemed to be either an old school friend of Prime Minister or a member of his cabinet. Now, quite suddenly, no one in Delhi knows him anymore. A major democratic revolution has taken place, almost unnoticed, leaving the urban anglicized elite on the margins of Indian political landscape. As Mulayam Singh Yadav put it on his elevation at the National Cabinet, for the first time, power has come to the underprivileged and oppressed, and we will use it to ensure that their lot is better. That is also stated intention of Lalu, as far his political succession may have done little in concrete terms to boost the welfare of the lower caste poor. But what certainly has to be done is to boost the confidence the lower caste are no longer content to remain at the bottom of the pile and be shoved around by the Brahmins. Lalu has given them a stake in power and made them politically conscious, exactly as the civil rights movement did for American blacks in the 1960s. The rise of lower caste politicians has done something to the slow rise of the Hindu revivalists movement by demonstrating to the masses how little they have to gain by voting in a Hindu theocracy dominated by the small castes which have oppressed them for millennia. In the dying days of 1992, India was engulfed in the bloody chain of the Hindu-Muslim riots that followed the deconstruction of the Babri Mosque at Ayodhya. Even the previously peaceful commercial capital of Bombay was burning. Yet, Bihar remained uncharacteristically, indeed almost miraculously peaceful. With a series of unambiguous threats to more excitable elements in the Bihar police force, Lalu has been able to contain the anti-Muslim pogroms, which elsewhere in India left 2,000 dead. Indian politicians are rarely predictable, but it was certainly one of the more unexpected developments in modern Indian history that led to the low caste and semi-literate Chief Minister of India's most corrupt and backward state becoming the custodian of the crumbling Nehruvian idea of a secular democratic India. The more I read about Bihar, the more it became clear that Lalu was the key to what was happening there. But ringing Bihar proved virtually impossible. From Delhi, it was much easier to get through to Britain, 10,000 miles further away. Unable to contact Lalu, I was forced to take potluck and book a flight to Patna without having arranged an interview, But by the remarkable good fortune, it turned out that Lalu had been speaking at a rally in Delhi, and I was returning to Patna on the same flight myself. The first I learned of this was when the Bihar flight was delayed half an hour while it waited for Lalu to turn up. When he eventually did so, striding on board like a conquering hero, he brought with him half his cabinet. Lalu turned out to be a small, broad-shouldered, thick-set man. His prematurely grey hair was cut in boyish early Beatles mop. He had reserved the whole of his first row of seats for himself. His aides, MPs and bodyguards filled up the next 7 tiers. They were all big, slightly sinister-looking men. All, including Lalu himself, were dressed in white homespun cotton pajamas, once the symbol of Mahatma Gandhi's identification with the poor, but now the unmistakable insignia of political power.